On November 7th, Thundercat, Carasoft, and NVIDIA teamed up to host a discussion with leading government panelists to speak on best practices and challenges agencies are facing with AI. Learn how we can plan to navigate complex policy landscapes, assess agency needs, and contribute to shaping the future of AI applications in the government. You can now tune into the conversation on the Feds at the Edge podcast, streaming on all major platforms. Visit thundercattech.com/events for more info. That's thundercattech.com/events.
It's Saturday, the 26th of October. I'm Ciara Evans, and this was a week that saw Labour announce NHS reform plans, King Charles heckled in Samoa, Harris and Trump neck and neck in polls, and Uma Thurman talks Kill Bill on its 20th anniversary.
Grab a cup of something hot, put up your feet, and get up to speed on the 7 biggest stories of the week. This is the Standout 7 from the Smart 7.
It's news,
but not the news.
Monday saw Health Secretary Wes Streeting launch a new consultation designed to help modernise the NHS over the next 10 years and make it more efficient. Proposals under consideration include giving patients smartwatches and wearable devices to help track conditions such as diabetes, cancer and heart disease. He's also considering ways to make the NHS more efficient and to reach the target of 2 million appointments per year. But he wasn't committing to the idea of fines for people who miss appointments just yet.
Once we've got the system working effectively, if we still have this problem of missed appointments, then I might be more open-minded. But what GPs have said to me is, look, the last thing we want is to have the added bureaucracy of administering fines for people who don't show up. Let's actually fix the reasons why people aren't showing up.
Other reforms in the Labour Party's 10-year plan for the NHS include more weekend working to help clear the waiting list and introducing more neighbourhood health centres to ease the pressure on local hospitals. Saffron Cordery of the NHS providers cautiously welcomed the moves but warned that changes in social care and local government will need funding.
We have to recognise that with that we're going to need some significant investment, not only in capital, which is the bricks and mortar, but we also need to recognise that we need to see wider reform across the NHS.
The public consultation on the NHS saw suggestions from the public posted online, which so far have included things like opening a Wetherspoons in every hospital and setting up a tipping system for medical staff. Next thing we know, we'll be dealing with Health Secretary Wesley McStreetface. But on a more serious note, on Monday, Prime Minister Keir Starmer said it's time for the nation to focus on the broken NHS and get it back to health.
We want to make sure that the NHS isn't just working a little bit better than it is now. We all want that. We want an NHS which is reimagined, made fit for the future.
Starmer was keen to emphasise his NHS credentials through his mother, sister and wife. But Matthew Taylor, the chief executive of the NHS Confederation, said the issues with the NHS run pretty deep.
Really, the model of care in the NHS is not fit for the demands that we face. We still in the NHS have a model which is predominantly based on the idea of people who are well, but they've got something wrong with a bit of their body. But in fact, 70% of demand in the health service now comes from people who've got long-term, often multiple conditions.
Thursday saw Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy confirm that they'll also be going to move ahead with the plan to ban single-use disposable vapes.
We hope that it will break the cycle of not just more and more children and young people taking up vaping, but the really alarming trend of more and more children and young people doing that at an earlier age.
Businesses will have until the 1st of June next year to sell their existing stock. And Circular Economy Minister Mary Creagh says it's also an important step in ending throwaway culture. Health Secretary Wes Streeting was also busy defending one of the most criticised healthcare roles, that of physician's associate. Doctors have been warning that the role blurs the line in medical care, but Wes says they have an important role to play.
The reason that they exist in the first place is because they were designed to take some of the pressure off doctors. The idea was that they could free up doctors' time doing things that physician associates could do, to free up doctors' time to do things that only doctors could do.
King Charles has been busy on a tour of Australia, but the welcome hasn't been entirely warm.
You committed genocide against our people. Give us what you stole from us. Our bones, our skulls, our babies.
That was the Indigenous Australian Senator Lydia Thorpe making her feelings known on the British Empire and the King. She did at least wait until he'd finished his speech before making her voice heard, all while dressed in a possum overcoat. She spoke to Sky News and said she had an important point to make about the plight of the Aboriginal people.
I did it for truth-telling about the royals who caused so much devastation to not only our people, but Indigenous people around the world.
David Littleproud, leader of Australia's centre-right National Party, wasn't particularly impressed.
This is what Senator Thorpe does. And sadly, it's become embarrassing for her. At times, it's just about trying to grab attention for herself.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer joined King Charles in Samoa on Thursday for the Commonwealth Summit. There's been considerable political pressure in advance of the meeting on the issue of reparations for Britain's historical role in the slave trade, and it's expected to be a heated topic of discussion at Friday's session, which will see 55 nations in attendance. Downing Street has been trying to ensure the issue of reparations is not on the formal agenda, but there is a background conversation underway. Speaking in Samoa on Friday, King Charles acknowledged painful aspects of Britain's past but didn't directly address reparations.
None of us can change the past, but we can commit with all our hearts to learning its lessons and to finding creative ways to right inequalities that endure.
Political activist Linda Bellos says there's nowhere to hide when it comes to the history of slavery and colonialism.
This is Britain's responsibility. Britain knowingly took human beings, sold also to the United States of America, and benefited directly.
The clock is ticking down to the US election and the polls remain almost deadlocked. Last weekend saw Donald Trump spend part of a rally talking at length about former golfer Arnold Palmer's penis. No, really. And then spending Sunday at a McDonald's serving fries at the drive-through window because of his obsession with Kamala Harris's CV. But on Monday, Trump had switched direction and was lecturing people on the importance of health food, apparently because former candidate and now supporter Robert Kennedy was keen on the idea.
Bobby Kennedy, right? Everybody likes Bobby. And he's so big into the health food and women, things, everything. He wants to do things in the environment. I mean, he says other countries that don't do anything are healthier than us, okay? We're not that healthy.
Well, under 2 weeks to go until the US presidential election on November 5th, Kamala Harris has seen some positive momentum at state level, and there's some indication that she's winning the arguments on the campaign trail, but she still has a mountain to climb to beat former President Trump. She's been calling out the big guns, including Usher and Lizzo and former President Barack Obama, who's been really fired up about Donald Trump.
What I cannot understand is why anybody would think that Donald Trump will shake things up in a way that is good for you. Because there's absolutely no evidence that this man thinks about anybody but himself.
On Wednesday, former Chief of Staff John Kelly confirmed that Trump regularly talked about how Hitler was misunderstood, and Trump's campaign launched a formal election complaint against the UK Labour Party. The issue arose over Labour volunteers heading to help Kamala Harris, which outraged Trump and his potential future Secretary of State, Richard Grenell, who wasn't too impressed either.
We don't want to have foreign interference. We don't want to have any foreign interference in our elections. We certainly don't want to do it in other countries' elections. And so I think this is a pretty open and shut case. Don't interfere in the American elections and you won't be sued.
As the clock is rapidly running down in the US election campaign, both sides are pushing hard to grab any undecided voters as they focus on what are seen as crucial swing states. Kamala Harris picked up another endorsement from a Republican on Thursday. Sean Riley, the mayor of Waukesha, Wisconsin, joined other GOP leaders, including Liz Cheney, in endorsing the vice president. Donald Trump continued to become more and more aggressive in his attacks on Harris and the Democrats, calling on former Fox host Tucker Carlson to speak at his rallies. Harris added Bruce Springsteen to her list of celebrity supporters on Thursday night in Atlanta, but in response to his campaign tactics, she also sharpened her attacks on Trump.
Do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do. And I also believe that the people who know him best on this subject should be trusted. Again, look at their careers. These were not politicians.
More Russian missile attacks this week prompted a fresh call from Ukrainian President Zelensky for more long-range weapons and air defence systems from Western allies. The response to his presentation of his recent victory plan has been low-key from Western leaders, and Russia continues to gain ground in the Donbass. Russian ambassador to the UK, Andrei Kelin, sat down for a rare interview with the BBC last Sunday. He was asked about the death of Dawn Sturgis in 2018 in Salisbury as a new inquiry into her death caused by the Novichok nerve agent opened last week. Russia continues to deny any involvement, but the ambassador was keen to criticise the UK's support of Ukraine, warning that Russia's victory will mean the end of Ukraine.
The UK government is waging aggressive war against Russia by the hands of Ukrainians. This is a proxy war by providing lethal weapons with which UK government is killing Russian soldiers and civilians.
Tuesday saw Russian President Vladimir Putin welcome 36 world leaders to a 3-day meeting in Kazan as part of the BRICS group. The BRICS group, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India and China, is meant to be a balancing point for the global south versus the G7. But with Russia taking over the rotating chairmanship, that summit has been all about Putin. Leaders attending included China's Xi Jinping and South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa, but Brazilian President Lula cancelled at the last minute. The issue of Russia's war in Ukraine came up in discussions between Putin and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who called for a resolution to the ongoing invasion.
We believe that the problems should be resolved in a peaceful manner. We fully support the early establishment of peace and stability. All our efforts give priority to humanity. India is ready to provide all possible cooperation in the times to come.
While Putin welcomes leaders, events continue to escalate in Ukraine as it becomes clear North Korea is now becoming increasingly involved as a Russian ally. That triggered a response from South Korea, who offered to begin supplying aid and weapons to Ukraine. UK Defence Minister John Healey warned the situation is increasingly volatile.
It is now highly likely that the transfer of hundreds of combat troops from North Korea to Russia has begun. It is as shocking as it is desperate.
Wednesday saw the United States make its first official statement on the news that North Korea has sent troops to fight for Russia in Ukraine. Speaking in Rome, US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin warned that his government would take it very, very seriously if troops from the DPRK were seen to cross from Russia into Ukraine. South Korea said at least 3,000 troops from the north have already shipped out, and they expect up to 10,000 may eventually travel, including special forces. The Kremlin has dismissed the story as fake news, and Russia's Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu has been warning about the potential for nuclear escalation over Ukraine.
The growing involvement of Western countries in the conflict creates global risks. The desire to inflict maximum damage on Russia could lead to a direct military clash between nuclear powers. We cannot but react to these threats.
The BRICS summit wrapped up in the Russian city of Kazan on Thursday. Russian President Putin used the opportunity to meet with world leaders, floated the idea of a BRICS currency to rival the dollar, and lectured UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Guterres' attendance at the summit has attracted fierce criticism, particularly from Ukraine, but he used his speech to call for what he described as a strengthening of the machinery of peace.
We need peace in Ukraine, a just peace in line with UN Charter, international law, and General Assembly resolutions. We must uphold the values of the UN Charter and the principles of sovereignty and political independence of all states.
Still to come in the Standout 7, prison releases upset Keir Starmer and Uma Thurman talks Kill Bill.
Right after this.
Ready for the next level of cybersecurity? October is Cybersecurity Month, and Gartner is building cybersecurity resilience in a complex world. From AI, new to role, identity and access management, to mid-size enterprise, government and beyond. Join the Security and Risk Management Summit 2025, the largest cybersecurity conference in North America. Pre-register at gartner.com/US/security-risk. That's gartner.com/US/security-risk.
Welcome back.
This week saw Israel continue strikes in both Lebanon and Gaza. Last weekend saw new strikes by the IDF on branches of the Hezbollah banking system Al-Qard al-Hassan. Israel said it's used to fund terrorist operations and is a legitimate target. Any hope that the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar would lead to a ceasefire seemed to be diminishing, and President of the Palestinian National Institute, Mustafa Barghouti, said Sinwar was never the issue.
The killing of Sinwar will not really help or improve the situation, because Sinwar was not the obstacle to achieving a ceasefire. The real obstacle to achieving ceasefire is Netanyahu.
Meanwhile, the US government announced plans to launch an investigation after highly classified documents that detailed Israeli plans to attack Iran were leaked. The leak on Telegram appears to have come from the Five Eyes intelligence network and will alarm Tehran. Former chief of MI6 John Sawyer said Iran tries very hard to avoid direct involvement in the conflict.
They've tried to keep out
of a wider conflagration. One of the purposes of these militias is to be a sort of forward defence for Iran, so that Iran doesn't have to get directly involved itself.
US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was back in the Middle East on Tuesday as he continued to try to nudge Israel towards a path to peace and ending of hostilities. He met with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, but there was no significant progress as Netanyahu says there needs to be a security and political change in Lebanon before Israel withdraws any troops. There were also fresh IDF strikes on Beirut, hitting near the main government hospital, which killed at least 18 people, including 4 children, while more than 60 were injured. As efforts continued to hold renewed ceasefire talks, Thursday night saw Israeli strikes hit suburbs in Beirut. Lebanese media also reported that 3 members of the press were killed in the south of the country in Israeli attacks on a journalist compound. Former Israeli Justice Minister Yossi Beilin says all sides have had enough.
It is really time to end this war. We are all paying a very high price. We are all victims, and again, we are competing with each other who is the bigger victim.
Tuesday saw another group of prisoners released early as the UK's prison system continues to struggle with overcrowding. Matters weren't helped by one prisoner being picked up in a white Bentley while shouting, "Big up Keir Starmer." That led to the Prime Minister expressing his frustration at the need to free another 1,100 offenders early. But he says that if releases didn't go ahead, the prison system would face complete paralysis. Justice Secretary Sabana Mahmood said the previous government is to blame and she's announced a review by former Justice Secretary David Gauke.
Nobody could say that prison is working right now, and this sentencing review is designed to make sure that prison does work in the future. At the moment, our prison system creates better criminals rather than better citizens.
Andrea Comer is the Chief Executive of Howard League of Penal Reform, and she told Radio 4 that part of the problem is the way that the prison system is run in the first place.
The reason we have higher reoffending rates is that people go into prison. At the moment, they're in their cells for 22, 23 hours of a day. They don't have the opportunities to retrain, to have education, to have the sort of psychological interventions that they might need or want to be able to move away from crime.
We haven't seen a whole lot of Uma Thurman recently, but she's back in a new movie called Oh Canada. It's directed by Paul Schrader, who wrote Taxi Driver for Martin Scorsese and also directed movies like American Gigolo and First Reformed, which got him an Oscar nomination. Uma's been chatting about working with legends and reminiscing about working with Quentin Tarantino, a relationship that turned rocky after a car crash on the set of Kill Bill. This year is the 30th anniversary of Pulp Fiction and the 20-year anniversary of Kill Bill Volume 2. And Uma told Kelly Clarkson she still has some memorabilia.
I have my costumes. I have my sword and I have my costume. It was a Bruce Lee onesie. Okay. I had just had a baby.
Eat it all.
I remember my mother telling me, like, you know, only about 10 pounds of that is the baby. The rest is still going to be with you. Enjoy your Sunday.
You've been listening to The Smart 7. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. Hit that follow button and have a great day. Give us 7 minutes, we'll give you the world.
Be ready no matter what the temperature with Crop Metcalf's $99 heating and cooling system check. Call 1-800-GO-CROP or visit cropmetcalf.com.
Crop Metcalf is the one with 5 stars.
Crop Metcalf, home of the 5-star technician.